How's it going, everybody? We've got another tutorial video for you here. We're going to continue our series covering the instruments on the synth, and in this video we're going to talk about the interference instrument, which is the second instrument that comes with the synth. So this instrument is a wave interference simulator. You generate some waveforms in 2 dimensions, you copy it multiple times, and then you interfere the copies with each other. So where the peaks of the waveforms line up, you get constructive interference, and when the peaks and the valleys line up, you get destructive interference. And the end result gets colorized, and what you see is the result on the screen here. So I would assume a lot of you guys are familiar with the basics of one-dimensional waveforms from like audio synthesis, like sine waves, square waves, triangle waves, all that kind of stuff. So this is doing something sort of like that, except it's in 2 dimensions. So the variety of waveforms is a little bit larger. And it might not be super familiar because it's a little it's slightly unusual from if you're coming at this from an audio background. But anyways, we're in the create view right here, and we'll go over how the instrument is arranged. So we see that the instrument is composed of 4 submodules. Some of them are familiar, or probably are familiar. The color module is shared between a lot of the instruments, like the fractal instrument, and some of the oscilloscopes use the exact same module. The modulation module, which we won't get into in this video, is shared across all the instruments, so that's definitely common functionality there. But the unique stuff for the interference instrument is this Wave 2D module and the interfere module. So the Wave 2D module generates this 2-dimensional waveform that we're talking about. The interfere module generates multiple copies of that waveform and then arranges them in space and animates that. It also does a little bit of colorization as a first step, but we'll get into that in a minute. So just like in any of the other instruments or submodules, you can just cycle through some of the presets that come with it and just load them out. So right now we're swapping out the actual waveform that's being generated. And then again, the interfere module is copying that a couple of times and creating the interference pattern. But yeah, we'll dive right into this module here. All right, what we see is that well, first of all, let's get this kaleidoscoping module out of the way. This is the exact same module you use in the recurse module in the fractal instruments. It basically just, well, first of all, we'll turn the preview on. Then you can select this and just basically add symmetry to your module. 3-way symmetry, 6-way symmetry, and so forth. It starts off, which we'll leave it on. Then the 2-dimensional pattern, which you see right now, is just an oscillation that goes in one direction. So this is generated by composing this guide right here with a wave. The guide kind of determines the direction of this wave and the general 2-dimensional pattern, and then it's put through this wave right here to generate a little bit more variance. So right now we have a cosine wave. We can turn it to a triangle wave to give it more of a sharp definition. A saw wave is going to kind of ramp up and then drop off, but there's some symmetry here. Square wave is an on-off pattern, and you have these other waveforms as well. Step wave for multiple levels, and so forth. So you can just kind of go in here and experiment, basically. And then this guide basically just determines the 2-dimensional structure. This gives you kind of like a grid pattern. This gives you a spiral, but it's got a symmetry going horizontally. This gives you a radial pattern. There's another type of radial pattern in here too. And these little glitches you see are basically just from the preview render. You don't actually see those when you are using this module. So the basic idea is you generate a 2-dimensional waveform. You've got a bunch of parameters in here where you can change like the frequency. You can rotate it, but because it's a circle, it's not really doing anything. You can move it around with these controls. Now you actually start to see the interference because it's actually like moving each of the copies in different ways. Yeah, so basically this is what we're generating as the waveform, and then the interfere module here takes multiple copies of that waveform and interferes them with each other. So we can select one copy of the waveform to basically just get that waveform you're generating. This has 2 copies of the waveform, and you can have all the way up to, I think, 10. The more copies, the more kind of strange it gets. And it's one of the things you kind of watch and just see how it evolves over time. So you load a module up here to determine how many copies of the waveform you have, and then you use this spread module to determine how they're actually organized and how they're actually animating through space. And these are just a bunch of equations, so you don't really need to understand exactly what any of these do. You just kind of mess around with it and see what you like. And then you have some controls in here. This determines how much of... So there's some colorizing that happens in here. So you can actually choose a color palette to start with. And that control determines how much of the color palette you use. This determines how much the color palette changes with distance from the center. There's some animation controls here too. And then, yeah, just similar to, or basically identical to a lot of the other instruments, you have a color module. It has some post-processing, an effect, you can turn on and off. Right now it's on invert, so we're turning it on and off. And it also has lighting. You can turn the lighting off to get a flat render, which also looks cool. You can go in here and swap out the wave with the band wave, which is a common way of getting audio activity. And now we're actually generating waveforms based on the audio. So this is our waveform. We're generating multiple copies of that. Let's turn the frequency down. And now we have an audio reactive interference pattern. So this is the basic idea behind the instrument. We're not covering everything here. There's definitely more to be learned about the wave generation and the interference module. But if you want to do that, I suggest checking out the manual or coming to one of our live streams. Anyways, thanks for coming by. Stick around for the next video where we're going to go over Wavy Boy, the 3D oscilloscope.